almost. Good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock, and I call to order the workshop of the Victoria City Council. Our workshops are informal, and with that, we'll dive right into our agenda. We have 2 budget items on our workshop agenda this evening. The first item is our 2022 Capital and Enterprise Funds, and presenting this evening is our Finance Director, Tricia Pollock. Ms. Pollock, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight is our 5th 2022 budget meeting. So we are in the home stretch now. On our agenda tonight are the budgets for the Victoria Recreation Center, utility fund budget, capital improvement plan, and then we will have council discussion. Please feel free to ask questions throughout whenever you have a question or comment. And as Dana previously mentioned, our department heads are here this evening to answer any questions about the capital improvement plan, specific equipment or projects that you might have questions about. So the Victoria Recreation Center budget, projected revenues are about 5.7% lower due to decreases in revenue since the pandemic. 83% of the revenues received are from the school district for their lease and expense reimbursements for wages and other building expenses. So really that decrease just has to do with the revenues that we receive for memberships and programs at the rec center. So this shows kind of that breakdown of those revenues. As you can see, that school district lease and those reimbursements really take up most of the chunk of that pie. So the Victoria Recreation Center budget expenses are also lower, about 9.9% lower than 21. The lower revenues on the previous slide results in those lower expenses. Less programs results in less expenses for those programs. And then the capital outlay projects include strength training equipment and security cameras. 40% of the expenses are for the debt service payment at the rec center. So after the rec center, we're going to move on to the water fund.
Can we ask questions now? Or we have to wait till.
Sure can.
So has there been any requests for further discussion with the school district and the arrangement that we have?
So that lease that we have with the school district is for the length of the bonds for the building. So that lease, I believe, is up in what year, Ann?
33.
So there's still quite a ways to go. So
I thought they requested to review it from time to time.
we have
but
requested,
There's no additional.
right, it stayed, it gets increased 2% annually. So other than that, there's really been no change to the lease.
And there's nothing that they can do to get out of it.
Dana would
Dana.
like to answer that.
Oh, hello. I'm looking over here at Ann, and you're the one with the answer.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Haber, members of the council. So there has been some recent conversations with the school district as they've had some turnover in staff and they're becoming familiar with the different contracts that are in place. So with the new superintendent, their new director of operations, the appetite for discussion has really been focused around aligning or taking a look at contract language and aligning that, making sure that what we're doing today is reflected accurately in those service contracts. So Ann has already been in contact with them, and we're working on some cleanup stuff, although we were going to be doing that after the referendum. So we're just waiting for the school district to reach out to finish those conversations, but there has not been any interest at this time to look at anything other than that.
Just one question.
Councilmember Buck.
The contract's up in 2033. Have we thought about what we will do if they do not renew the contract for the future?
So, Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Black, great question. Yes, there's been some conversations at the staff level, just thinking ahead, and with finance and making sure that our long-term financial plan will allow us to meet the obligations that we have. So right now, as you are all aware, the Victoria Recreation Center is funded through mostly service fees and then the payment for the lease with the school district. And so it's right now not being supported by property tax dollars. At some point in the relative near future, next several years, probably as part of one of our strategic planning discussion items, we'll have to take a deeper dive into that to make sure that if the council's priority is to continue for that type of arrangement, to not have the center be backed by property tax dollars, we'll have to make sure that we start thinking about and planning for that in the future. Now, with that being said, there's one big exception to that, like large capital items, replacement of a roof or something like that, will likely have some property tax support dollars, but the operations and smaller capital items should be funded through those user fees. But that'll be a policy discussion that we'll have to have. But the long-term financial plan so far is looking like we've been planning for this for a number of years. And our long-term financial plan does take that into account, that loss of revenue.
Okay.
Quick question about, so we know that the Chanhassen Storm has one sheet of ice that they call their home ice. And also Holy Family Catholic High School has a sheet of ice that's called their home ice. Is that correct? And so we have an arrangement with both of those organizations to lease out that space to them. So I would assume that the Chanhassen ice is in the ISD, is in the school districts, but where do we find the revenue for the Holy Family ice? Please, Ms. Monkey, come join us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the lease agreement that we have with the school district, the city leases the first rink that was constructed, and then the city owns the land and leases that land to the school district as part of that agreement. So all the revenue that is generated by those rinks goes to the school district. And the lease agreement actually specifies that those two entities will have priority ice. So when all is said and done, when the lease ends, and that's several years away, the city will have to consider what happens when the lease is up, and if then the city takes that back.
Okay, so are you saying that Holy Family pays the school district?
Yes.
Okay, so that's wrapped up in that lease agreement?
Yes.
And it's not a separate one?
No.
Great, that's what I needed to know,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
any other questions on this before we move on?
Yep.
Ms. Pollack, please continue.
Thank you, Mayor. So our next fund is the Water Revenue Fund, and the revenues are 7% higher than 2021 due to the increase in number of new households. The proposed water rate change is from this study that we did in 2020. And we had discussed this at a workshop as well, and council had decided at that time that due to the pandemic that we were going to wait for a while on any kind of changes to the water rate and sewer rate structures. So we are now proposing for 22 to make those changes that we had done the study on in 2020. So the results of that would be an increase in the base charge of $2 per quarter, and then we would change from 10-tier rates in the summer to year-round 5-tier rates. The impact of this to most customers with average or lower volume usage, they'll see a minimal change or actually a reduction in their bill. Customers with higher volume usage see increases in their bill. And the new rate structure promotes water conservation, and it will also eliminate the irrigation credits that are given to HOAs. This revenue meets current and future obligations and minimizes future debt issuance for our long-term plan for the water fund. Does anybody have any questions about the new rates before we talk about expenditures?
One of the things that we talked about in regard to the higher volume users is that we wanted to communicate that to them well in advance of the increase.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about what's been done to notify those users?
Yeah, so we have been having, Kendra had done in the last newsletter that went out to households, we had done a whole page on the new rate structure. So to kind of start explaining to that and also to start talking about the monthly billing. So we have done that, and then we have also been visiting with some of the HOAs and also the on our bills. We'll be putting on our next bill as well about the new rates coming up. So we've been trying to get the word out in different areas and on the website and on the newsletters and on Facebook, all of those avenues. We haven't really heard too much feedback from residents on it. I think part of it has to do with that most of their rates will actually be reduced than increased. So I think that the reactions have been positive. And also for monthly billing, a lot of positive reaction to that.
That was the one thing I wanted to ask. Since we're going to go to monthly billing, the base charges per quarter, should we just do a base charge per month?
So, Councilmember Black, Mayor, members of the council, yeah, so just because we're still in that quarterly, we won't be going to monthly billing till probably the second quarter of the year. We need to get the meters changed out to all one kind of meter before we can do monthly billing. So we still have a little bit of work to do on that mechanical end before we can start that monthly billing, which is why we're still showing the per quarter rates.
But that will be,
Down into 3.
Yeah, so it'll be divided by 3 then. So the monthly impact will just be the third of whatever we're talking about for quarter. And then, your water usage per month will be significantly less than per quarter, so.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I just want to add on to what Trish was mentioning on the top users. We're hitting several spots as a city entity in that. And as she mentioned, there are also some HOAs that are using significant water. Those HOAs happen to be getting those credits that were mentioned that will be proposed for elimination. And we have, as Tricia noted, that we've been having conversations with them. But so far, people understand, and we've not really received any negative feedback. But I just wanted to mention that we're taking a lot of those top user spots and working internally to set an example as well.
Yeah, good, thank you. All right, Ms. Pollack?
So the water fund expenses are higher than 2021 due to the added utility billing technician in order for us to do the monthly billing. And then also we added the utility superintendent. The change from quarterly to monthly billing cycles, there are some additional expenses incurred there with postage and bill printing and whatnot. So that is the bulk of that increase. And the capital outlays include the construction of well 5 and also accounts for possible water main oversizing. We budget that same amount each year, not really knowing if we'll be paying for oversizing to developers or not, but we have that at least budgeted in. The debt service is for $819,000 is for the current financing of the water treatment plant, but that is going to be paid off in 2023, so we're getting very close to that. The projected year-end balance is $193,000 less than last year's fund balance, so we're not projecting to decrease much of that fund balance, especially this first year with the rate changes. It's good to make sure that we have a stable fund balance.
And so question, Trish, on the operating expenses, is it fair to say that that 20% year over year is a one-time deal because of the new hires?
Yes, that would be correct. That would be a one-time year over year. Does anybody have any additional questions about the water fund?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So sewer fund, similar to water fund, there will be some changes to the rates. We are going to be decreasing the base charges actually for sewer, $1.44 per quarter. So then we're also changing, right now we have one tier and we're gonna go to the same 5-tier rates as the water fund has. So that's a little bit of a change, but most customers with average or lower usage will see minimal or reduction in their bill. So again, the higher volume users will see increases in their bills, which encourages the water conservation. Again, the revenue meets the current and future obligations and minimizes future debt issuance. So the projected year-end balance is pretty flat to the previous years. On the expenses side, we see that a little bit higher year over year again, increase due to that addition of the utility billing technician and the utility superintendent, and that change from quarterly to monthly billing cycles. The Met Council increase was 18%, which was pretty significant this year, so that accounts for quite a bit of that increase as well. As you can see, 59% of the expenses on the sewer side are for the Met Council fees. So that is that 59%. Capital outlay includes the County Road 18 trunk sewer replacement. Again, we have some oversizing for developments if needed, and then replacing the sewer truck and some pumps for lift station number 8. The debt service is the interest for the south area sewer extension project that we're working on now. This would just be the interest portion the first year. It's just the interest that we pay. And then that projected year-end fund balance of just under $2 million. Any questions about the sewer fund?
What's included in those contractual services?
So the contractual services would be for contracts that we have. Some of the sewer contracts, Brady, do you know offhand? Televising, cleaning. So it's just the some of the basic services.
This is money we pay to our vendors to keep our.
That's correct. So it's stuff that we don't necessarily repair ourselves, that we have to outsource for, like,
Understood.
probably cleaning lift stations, like Brady said.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Other questions? Great, moving on.
All right, stormwater. So the stormwater rates, We did do a study last year. We've decided that we're going to delay any kind of major stormwater rate changes, and we'll look at it for 2023. We're still kind of trying to decide on how that looks and how we make those changes and communicate that to the people that would be most affected, which would be mostly like commercial businesses. So we're gonna hold on that since we have these other rate changes in place. So we're just proposing the $2 per quarter increase, which has been historically what we've been doing from year to year. So most of those revenue increases has to do with increase in number of households. The operating expenses are significantly higher than what we had in the past because there's projects that Kara has proposed that are worked on for next year. Some of the stormwater ponds issues that we've got to start addressing. So that's why that contractual services is significantly higher. The projected year-end fund balance is basically going to stay flat, so. Any other questions about stormwater?
This is for our stormwaters, right? What we're taking care of in our city.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yep.
Just want to make sure.
So now we're gonna move on to the capital improvement plan. So it's a 5-year plan, which runs from 2022 through 2026. Adoption does not mean that it's automatic approval. Anything costing over $20,000 is still going to require council approval, and you will see that come before you when those items come up for purchase. They are included in the budgets. And the projects for 22 through 26 are adopted conceptually, and funding or financing has been planned for all of the projects that we are going to be reviewing. The first one is the equipment vehicles for building inspections. There's one vehicle replacement scheduled in this next 5 years. And those are funded through the building permit revenues. So we're replacing the 2011 Ford Escape. Public Works Capital Equipment Fund, there's one vehicle replacement proposed for 22, truck number 120. Annually, we evaluate each item, inspecting things like condition and maintenance and looking at operational efficiencies and safety to see if we can delay purchases or need to accelerate purchases or make other replacements. So this plan can change from year to year, but it's a good projection of what's needed and what's upcoming. And this fund balance is supported by an annual transfer from the general fund. Do you have any questions about those items?
So,
Go ahead.
okay, so the fund balance that you're showing on the right of the screen is the fund balance following the purchase of these things that we've got programmed for the next 5 years. Is that correct?
Correct, so it'd be their year-end fund balances.
Got it.
And for things further out the curve in like 2025 and 2026, are we including, I assume we're including interest or we're accruing the additional cost for what it would cost then versus now?
Inflation?
Inflation, thank you, that's the word.
Yes, we do account for some inflation, as you can see, like the vehicle that we're looking at purchasing for next year, we have at 48,000, and the ones in 2026 are at like 63,000. So, I mean, we are using some inflationary factors in those. But we will obviously get quotes and estimates and present that to you before the purchase is made, so we'll know what it actually is cost.
I have a question. On the replacement of the mower for 100,000, is that one more?
Councilmember Black, yes, that is a very large mower. Jeff maybe could explain a little bit about that, the mower, that's the,
Do we just have one like that?
Yeah, it's a Toro Groundsmaster. We use that for a lot of our ball fields in town. It's actually a 16-foot width mower, so it covers
Okay.
a lot of ground in a short time.
All right, thank you.
thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Go, carry on.
Okay, our next one is the fire truck and equipment fund. The fire engine replacement was prepaid in 2021, as you probably remember, for some savings on interest that we are making from prepaying that. It's going to be delivered in '22. So you can see that that's reflected on the chart on the right and the fund balance, so it dips really low, but it does rebuild over the next several years. There's also a planned purchase for an unmanned aerial vehicle, pagers, and radio encryption in 2022. And this fund is also supported by a transfer from the general fund. But in addition, warning siren fee revenue is collected on new developments. And then there's also some donations that get received to this fund. Do you have any questions about any of these items for Andrew?
I'm looking out 5 years at that big ladder truck that we need.
Yeah.
Where's the money coming from for that, chief? We do not have that kind of money in the couch
We need to have a
cushions.
big old party for donations.
Good evening, Mayor Council. So that project, I'll say, is very fluid. And what we're tying that project to is downtown west development. That's really what's going to trigger the need for that piece of apparatus. And once we see some buildings down there, that'll start the process of changing our insurance rating if a vehicle like that isn't within the city. So we're tying it to that development. That's our best estimate as far as when delivery would be needed for that piece of equipment. We know that we're not going to be able to pay $1.7 million cash on a prepayment for something like that. So we would envision something like that being funded through kind of a pay what we can in cash and then do a lease program or something for the rest of it, so.
Okay.
Go ahead, Derek.
The replacement truck, number 11, is that, are we gonna do the same kind of program that we did with the pumper truck, or the truck that came from the company in Wisconsin?
Correct, and that's the one we did. So that's number 11 that's in 2022
Yeah.
is the one we ordered in
Oh,
June
that's-
of this year.
Okay.
So we've already laid this money out.
Yeah, that's already paid for.
Yep, it is paid, and
That's why we don't have any money.
we had a pre-construction meeting on that truck last week, so the process is starting to ramp up on that.
When do we expect delivery on that?
I'd love to give you an answer. It's actually got delayed, which works in our favor a little bit because we are collecting interest on that. We're estimating right now September of 2022,
Okay, so still this year?
next year, 22.
Within the count, with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
next year. You're right, okay.
The command vehicle, do we have 2 command vehicles?
We have 2 today, correct?
Okay, so we're going to have to replace one in 2025 and one in 2026?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's a
Anything
lot of
else?
money.
I think that's,
Okay.
All right, thank you.
all right, Ms. Pollock.
Moving right along, Capital Facilities Fund. So the fire station renovation is scheduled for next year. And also the land purchase for the future fire station. While there's enough fund balance to pay for the purchases for the next 5 years, as you can see, our fund balance does dip really low in 2024. And as our buildings age, this may be a fund we want to evaluate, given the adoption of our long-term facility space planning study to ensure that we have adequate funding to maintain those facilities into the future. The fund balance is supported by annual transfers from the general fund, And by planning ahead, we can try to avoid those one-time large transfers, which can significantly impact that levy. So, so it's something that we do have in our plan, but as other items come up, we need to be prepared to probably try and have a little better fund balance in this fund in the future. So we're okay for right now, but looking ahead. That fire department land purchase will not be cash paid out of this fund. That would be probably likely an interfund loan from another fund.
Do we have money coming, we have money for, can this be, the pandemic money, can this be used for that? The fire station renovation? Is that what we're planning?
Ms. Hardy.
Mayor, Councilmember Black, members of the council, thank you. Great question. We're still evaluating the use of those ARPA funds, so American Recovery, something Act. I can't remember. So the eligible expenditures are quite a bit different with the ARPA funds than they were with the CARES Act funds. So under the CARES Act, that would have been a slam dunk. We could have certainly made a case for that. We are still evaluating options. We fully intend to bring that back to you. Eligible uses, broadly speaking, water, sewer infrastructure, cybersecurity, and broadband expansion. And so we have been narrowing our focus into different types of projects. Again, it has some tentacles to it, so it can't be something that's in your budget. Same types of limitations that the CARES Act had, but different buckets on how to spend those, and we have a longer period of time. So we're still in the process of evaluating that. There may be bits and pieces of the renovation that could use those funds if it's tied into the water treatment side. And we're not quite far enough in, well, we haven't started design yet, so we're not certain that we'll be able to utilize, or would it even make sense to recommend that? We don't know that right now, but it is certainly something that we'll continue to look at. And we plan to bring back a plan with some recommendations for council to consider on how to direct the use of those funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions? Ms. Pollock, please.
Okay, so the IT fund, as you might remember, was brand new for 2021. So that fund balance is just getting started, and we've already identified several projects for this fund. So for 22, there's a security system replacement scheduled, along with some switch additions and computer monitor replacements. This fund balance as well comes as a transfer from the general fund. Do you have any questions about these items?
Nope. Doesn't look like it.
Nothing.
Park fund. So the neighborhood trail renovations that are listed in 2022, we've decided after 22, we are going to start budgeting those as a line item since they are a renovation. So after 22, you won't see that on here anymore, which is why the rest of the years are blank for that. We also have a tennis court replacement at Lions Park for $80,000, and then the outdoor pickleball courts for $500,000 for next year. The fund balance comes from park dedication fees that we receive from developers, and then also general fund transfer for unfunded parks. So since we don't really know when we'll receive park dedication money and how much it will be, we don't budget for it until we know for sure when and how much we are going to get. So projects sometimes need to get delayed, or if new or different projects were added, we would have to identify a different source of revenue for those. Do you have any questions for Ann on any of these parks?
I have a question about the Bayfront Park, the Bayfront Plaza improvement. That's in 20, how long has that been pushed out? Seems like I've seen it for a long time.
Good evening, Council, Councilmember Black. The Bayfront Plaza improvements are basically where, right below City Hall here, where the, I want to call it the gravel pit is, the seating area. So the concept for that came about many years ago, and really the intent at the time was to raise funds and get donations for basically the whole thing. It's been an uphill climb to do that. So as the Park and Rec Committee looked at all of the various park projects that we have today and out into the future, this was one that they felt strongly about, and now including it into the capital fund, so we can actually get it done.
What do those improvements involve?
Look like? It would be the removal of that area that exists today and more of a replica of what the Bayfront Park looks like, and also the bandstand. So it would be a larger paver area that would provide a little more ADA access to the site, and some added stormwater features within the pervious pavers. So it's just kind of an expansion of kind of the three.
To get down there, like, are there gonna be steps or something?
No, we would still, it's just mostly up in the top area. So the access still remains down the path on the east end.
Okay, so there is a path to
Yes.
get you down there? Because when I was down there trying to go down that hill in
That's,
heels,
yeah,
I
that's a
had to
challenge.
take.
It's a ways down, yep.
Okay, so there is,
Yeah, so that, the design, I mean, because that hill's so steep, there's some significant switchbacks that would have to happen up in this area to make it ADA compliant, so.
okay, so you need to raise funds for this.
It's now within within our CIP moving forward, so it's hopefully not gonna get delayed.
Okay.
It would be an improvement, I think, in 24. Five?
Wait, no, wait, four.
2024.
Yeah. And then pickleball, have you gotten any closer to a location?
Yes, at the last Park and Rec Committee meeting a week ago tonight, the recommendation from them was to place it at the Recreation Center.
Okay.
They evaluated, I think, 6 sites in
Saw
total.
that and I was waiting for it and I hadn't seen the
Yep.
report, so, yeah. Good choice, thanks.
Trish?
Okay, so our next fund is the Trail Gap Fund. The $75,000 in 2022 is for the feasibility study for the County Road 43, County Road 11 to Watermark Trail Gap, which has construction scheduled for 2024 at approximately $875,000. The current CIP doesn't show that newest trail gap connection directed by council recently, the Auburn East, towards downtown along Highway 5. So the Park and Rec Committee has been reviewing. And do you have any updates on that trail?
That trail was introduced at the last Park and Recreation Committee meeting. We had just, after the Bavaria Trail
Collapse.
was removed from our construction project, the committee, the next month after that, reviewed and went over the priorities, and they did confirm the County Road 43, and then in conjunction with the LRT trail going west, to also focus in on that. They were both 2A and 2, or one was 2A and one was 2B. So we will, since we had just done the review and update, we will be taking that back again for them to rank like they did the other trails. And then that will get placed into our priority list. So we'll be doing that probably in the spring.
Okay. One other question. When we get ready to do this study for the watermark, for instance, the 75,000, I know that it's going to affect certain residents going that way. Can we make sure that they're all right with that before we spend the money?
Yeah, so the Park and Recreation Committee, they kind of came up with a great idea. Try to spend a minimal amount of money on feasibility so we can get a really good idea on what that trail is actually going to cost. Because those estimates, they're estimates, so we're using it on a per linear foot based on previous trails. So until we get into the real good, fairly decent design phase, I don't know how much retaining wall we're gonna need, I don't know how much boardwalk we're gonna need. So the Park and Rec Committee recommended we just spend as much as we needed to out of that 75,000, and I've got an estimate now of about 5,000 in order to get us a pretty good cost on that, instead of going full-blown design like we did on the last one. So that's the intent after the first of the year.
Okay. My question, though, is before you even do that, to check with the residents first to see if they
Yeah.
will even agree to it.
Yep, we will do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Other?
Is that underpass at
Where is that?
Madeline Creek? Is that
The Highway 5 underpass?
Yes.
okay?
Where is it?
Madeline Creek and Whispering Hills Park, right below Highway 5 after you cross the light, right down.
And then what does it connect to on the other
It
side?
connects to an existing trail in the Parkview, thank you, Kara, Parkview neighborhood.
Oh.
There's an existing trail there that, and again, one of the trails to nowhere, that will likely also have to be redone because it's just been sitting there unused for probably 15, 20 years, so.
Eeh.
But
Okay.
that's part of the Highway 5 funding, federal funding program as well, so it'd be, it was included in the funding request, so it would be likely a 50-50 match for the city and
So,
that.
so
This
the,
is when they do the Highway 5 improvement.
so this $500,000 is our share of it? Is 50% of the
Underpass
cost?
is gonna cost over $1 million.
Underpass, yes. Or an overpass, either one was gonna cost over $1 million, yep. They're expensive.
Apparently so. All right.
And so remind me where it connects to, because it's connecting to a trail that's
Existing, yes.
existing trail that goes nowhere.
No, the
Okay.
trail that it,
Okay, I
the
wanna
trail that
make
it
sure.
connects to goes nowhere today. So it would connect up to that trail, and then it runs into South Park Drive or where the
Where the dog park is?
Yes, it runs there to the LRT.
Okay, yeah. I
So
was
there's
like,
existing
I
trail
hope we're not
that
connecting
it connects
to,
to.
spending
Yeah.
$1 million to
Or
connect to
would.
a dead end.
No,
Yeah, I'm not for that, yeah.
no,
Let's be clear
neither are
about
we.
that. Yeah, okay, understood. Yeah,
Thank you.
this will not make it a dead end. Yeah.
No, this will be a good connector.
Kirklocken to Lake Bridge Trail. Is that where you're going to try to go through behind those backyards?
Yes,
Oh, okay, you're going to check with those neighbors too?
yes,
Okay,
we'd have to, because
Yeah.
they own the property.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So these are just thoughts right now.
yes.
All righty.
All right. Anything else? Thanks. All right, Ms. Pollock.
All right, thank you. So next up is the Water Enterprise Fund. So we touched on this when we were talking about the water budget. So that well 5 and that trunk main oversizing we discussed. So the other two items in this 5-year CIP include the water tower painting and the water storage facility. So you may recall the water tower was inspected recently, and we were able to delay that repainting from, it was going to happen this year. We were able to delay that out to 2025 based on its condition. Some of the larger projects are budgeted using bond proceeds for portions of the project. The funds are supported by the utility fees that we collect.
So question for you here on this. The trunk sewer main oversizing that's shown in each year, if we don't spend that, because we don't spend it every year, if we don't spend it, do we just move it forward or do we continue to add to it?
It just stays in fund balance. So
We add 112,000 every year?
So we add we budget for 112,000 every year, but we may or may not use it. So we would just be under budget, and those funds stay in that because it's an enterprise fund, so it runs like a business, so it just stays in the fund balance. So it's not accumulating at all. There's just the 112,000, and it may or may not be, we may do oversizing it maybe even more than that, or it may be less than that. It's just kind of a ballpark figure of what we may need.
Okay, so yeah, that was my question. It sounds like if we don't use it, we just carry it forward. We don't accumulate another 112,000 the next year.
Exactly.
Got it. All right, thank you. Other questions?
I had one. The water storage, is this the additional storage? I thought we were going to move that up.
Ms. Guerin, welcome.
Hi.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. What year, I can't see that far.
25.
It's in 25. If we started on it now, it's generally a 2-year process. What's going to transpire over the next couple of months? We're reevaluating location for that storage facility, location for future water treatment plant number 2 in light of the results of our well siting study. So we're evaluating sites for those things. But what will also happen after the close of 2021, we're going to revisit all of our projections in light of this year's past growth as well as drought conditions. So we'll be redialing in what we think makes sense from the system side, and certainly we'll continue to work on that and update the council as we work through some of that planning stuff. But yes, could be sooner.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
So the sewer enterprise fund, again, we touched on those 2022 items earlier this evening. So the 23 items, there's a couple of generators for lift stations needed, off-road easement reel, lift station 11, and then also another larger project in 25 for the lift station 18 upgrades. So again, some of the larger projects are budgeted using bond proceeds, and then some will be paid for with cash. These funds are also collected from utility fees. Do you have any questions on any of these items for Kara or Brady?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, so we move on to the long-term street maintenance fund. I know we've talked a lot about streets lately in previous meetings, but this fund is funded by the general fund transfer, and also some street maintenance state aid is in this fund. So that pays for crack sealing and seal coating, bridge inspections. There are funds allocated in our long-term financial plan to pay for all of these projects in this 5-year plan. The city stresses preventative maintenance and renewal strategies to achieve a more stable annual costs and lower total life cycle costs than reactive repair and renewal. So annually, Kara, the city engineer, reviews the plans, and she decides on what the timing and the replacement schedules are, and we put them all into our long-term capital plan. Do you have any questions on any of these projects?
I just had a question about the Highway 11 and 5 roundabout. That's in 2026. Gonna get your exercise.
Mayor, members of the city council, that's where it's programmed in the Arboretum Area Transportation Plan, but we've had conversations with the county about potentially seeing what can be done to move up the timing of those improvements. I do have a meeting scheduled with the county next week to really, there's a whole bunch of funding application packages around the corner, so they want to get the city's input on what those priorities need to be, so we'll be talking about that when we meet next week, I think it is.
Okay. Are we gonna talk to them about the traffic light at 5 and 11?
Yes, that too.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Other questions on this? Ms. Pollock?
Okay, so city staff spent some time reviewing the transportation projects in the graphic you see on the right-hand side. And you've seen this previously with Kara and the discussions we've had on that Arboretum Area Transportation Plan. So we've created a long-term financial plan to fund the city's share of these projects. We anticipate using some state aid or MSA funds, street improvement bonds, possibly to fund our share. As you can see on the charts on the left, we've scheduled these in the appropriate years so that, and we've also put those estimated debt service payments into our long-term financial plan for these bonded projects so that we can be prepared for when that time comes so that we are able to complete these projects with the county. Do you have any questions about these specific projects for Kara?
I don't think so.
I'm good.
Thank you for doing that work. I know that's been a,
That was a big,
yeah, it's been a question of ours, how we're going to pay for all of that. Now here it is a plan. So bravo.
So staff's asking for your feedback on the 5-year CIP, that any of those budgets we just discussed, the enterprise funds and the recreation center. Do you have any additional feedback for our staff to direct us?
I do. I have a question. I want to go back to the Victoria Rec Center, right? I know the lease is out several years, and the 83% that's coming from the school district, right? I mean, that's a sweetheart of a deal for us, right? But does it make, and this may not be a popular opinion, but does it make any sense to look at that now in good faith in terms of, they're paying 80% of it, right? And I wouldn't renew that in 2033 if I were them, but can we do something to be more partnership with them so come 2033 we're not looking at an 80% deficit, right? Potential. I know we would prepare for that ahead of time, obviously, but as a way to keep that partnership going and redo that sooner than later.
well, you have to remember too that they're collecting all the fees for the ice. So if they were not to renew, we would be collecting those fees to help.
Assuming that they
Well,
are going to still have their sheet of ice there, right?
well, hockey's big here. I mean,
not a lot
Holy
of other
Family,
options.
huh?
There's not a lot of
There's not a lot of options, so,
I mean, if the school district wanted to build their own facility, they'd still be going to the taxpayers for it. They already have 2 sheets of ice, well, 1 sheet of ice roughly, that they're using. So
they have full control over
they
it.
have they have say-so who uses it. So, I mean, if they were gonna build another one, would cost, they'd be spending more money than what they are right now. I mean, is that a good guess, Ann, that if they were to build a new facility, they'd be spending more than they are now in terms of payments on land and facility and all that?
Well, building always.
Sorry to make you guesstimate.
And I don't know if I'd dare to venture a guess without being able to look at the assets and deficits.
Yeah.
I do know that, their margins are challenging for them with what's coming in and what they're paying. So,
Yeah, they need to spend their money on building more schools, I think. So,
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. If you would like to add this to our all-day planning session, just to have a deeper dive discussion into that, I can certainly add that. I think we'd probably be looking at March, early March again this year for that.
let's do it.
Something that the
Yeah, I
council would
think
like
so.
to do?
I mean, you guys bring up good points, right? And I don't, I'm just looking at that whopping 83%, right? I'm like, if that were me on the other side, I mean, I'd never want to, you know, but I don't necessarily understand all the economics on the other side either. But it just seems like if there's something that we can do to be more, to create more revenue post 2033, being taking more partner at not that we're not being partners, but I think you know what I'm saying. If we cover it in March for a quick discussion, then I think that's fine.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, I think where you're gonna get more memberships and more money in is if we ever decided to make improvements there. I mean, I think it was when I first moved, right, about 5 years ago or so, wasn't there the big survey on should there be splash pad or pool, and I don't really recall what the results of that were, but I mean, I know lots of people who decide to go, you know, whether it's Lifetime or if it's the Chaska Rec Center because they have pool and
Right.
other amenities. And to me, I'm not saying it's worth it. I'm just saying that's probably the only way you're ever gonna get a ton more people coming.
Yeah.
To the,
I sat in the audience when they presented all of that, and basically the council at the time said, well, that's really nice, but we don't have the money. And that was the end of it.
yeah, and that's fair. I mean, if it's not worth it, it's not worth it at this
Right.
point. That's my only, like, if you're ever gonna get the rates that you really want to, you know, that to bring in
Right.
the money, we would have to upgrade, I think.
I think sooner rather than later, it would be good to go after that market because we are losing those people.
Yeah, we are.
They're out of town.
I've
They're already
talked
going.
to them, and they're like, yeah.
Adding another project that starts with a P and ends in an L. I know pickleball is good, but there's something much shorter that I think everybody would like if we can do that.
And is it worth it while we're getting the funds from the school, right? The additional, you know, the 80% that you're talking about before that dips down and we renegotiate in 33 or whatever you said, 2033 or whatever it is.
Does the school district, now we're getting into stuff that isn't any of our business, but does the school district, I would assume, has other contracts with other communities? You know, they've got ice in Chaska, they've got other things, and, you know, I don't know that our agreement is out of line with any of those. And, you know,
Does anybody know what that relationship is with the Shasta Community Center?
I don't.
I believe they just rent ice there. And that the Chanhassen Rec Center, you know, they have an agreement with them on that. I don't know what that is, but I believe at Chaska they just rent ice.
Interesting. Okay. Other thoughts or direction for, Trish, do you know the amount of money that we budget annually to transfer into these funds and kind of the history of that? What is that number and what is the history of that?
So,
Do we up it every year?
so are you talking about a particular capital fund, or are you talking about as a whole?
As a whole. So
So-
our taxpayers, I think I want our taxpayers to understand that we are charging them today to make these improvements in the future. So we are very thoughtfully planning and budgeting for the future.
Yeah, so for 2022, the transfers amount to $1,029,000.
So $1,029,000 of our levy, of our roughly $6 million levy, is for future expenditures.
Correct.
Council, thoughts, questions? Anything for staff?
No, I understand it. It's investing in the future.
Part of our job is to sit here and think about those things years down the road.
I mean, maybe one item that I would note in regards to Councilmember Hebert's question about the Victoria Recreation Center, when that lease is done with the school district, then that debt service payment is paid off. So that does decrease the expenditures at the rec center significantly as well. I mean, the hope would be to be able to build up revenues from memberships and such within the time frame to be self-supporting when that day would come if they were not to renew. But yes, I mean, we would realize those savings as well.
How does the capital improvements and you know, the maintenance of that we must be using some of the revenues from our community and then some of the revenues from that lease agreement
Yes.
cover those?
So most of, like, all of the expenditures that we have, like for the capital, like you mentioned, we have that built in. And yes, so the revenues that we receive from programs and memberships are paying for most of that as well. And then we also have planned, you know, future expenses that we'll need coming up that we're going to be using that $1 million fund balance for, which is why we kind of keep track of that, knowing that we have future expenses and we're not building that significantly each year. So,
In regard to those ARPA funds, and the fact that it can't be something that's been budgeted or planned for, do we find ourselves at a disadvantage because we've done this kind of planning?
Mayor, members of the council, no, not on the types of expenditures that they have. There are certainly things that we just don't have the level of detail on it. And when they say it can't be in your adopted budget. So if we're planning for those things, that's certainly something most communities, a lot of communities are doing. So it's not that we haven't thought about it. It's just not in our adopted budget.
Understand. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Any final questions on this item from council? All right. Then moving on, our second workshop item is our 2022 proposed budget and levy. Ms. Pollack, this is also you.
thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So we're just going to take a look at where we are at currently on the general fund levy and budget. The council approved the preliminary levy, as you remember, in September in the amount of $6.6 million. This amount remains the same as staff is waiting for some final information on election of employee benefits, which could impact it to be able to reduce that slightly. But as you know, we're not allowed to raise the levy, so we are still looking for ways to reduce it and may be able to see some savings on those benefit elections. That closes out this week, so we'll know next week, basically, whether or not we have any reductions. We'll give you that information when we come back on December 13th for that final budget approval from you. The county recently made some adjustments to the net tax capacity. As you can see on the right there, it did go up a little bit, which lowers our tax capacity rate. So that did go down since our preliminary levy discussion in September. So our 2021 tax capacity rate was 32.2. So 1.1 or 1.6% lower is what we're projecting for next year. So really, this is all I have to show you. That levy at 5.21% is the same as max tax. So if you have any comments or feedback or anything you want staff to consider before that final meeting in on December 13th, we'd love to hear from you, any of those comments.
Council? No. Okay.
Good.
Everybody's feeling okay about this, so, so we'll wait for those final numbers. I know there was something escapes me now, we added something kind of as a, what was that thing that we put in and we said, let's think about that, we want to make sure it's in the max tax, because we can always pull it back out. What was that?
Yes, Mayor, members of council, we added the $6,800. That was for more research opportunities for commercial expansion. So that was that piece, and that's included. It was included in the max tax.
Council, other questions or thoughts for staff? Okay, if there's no further discussion, and there are no more items to come before the council this evening, so we will adjourn. May I have a motion to adjourn? We need to.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. We'll be back here at 6:30 with the general council meeting.